Hello, my name is David Kelsey, and this video will present the distinction between dependent and independent premises. Dependent and independent premises, this is a distinction in the type of support that premises can offer for the conclusion of an argument. They can either support the conclusion dependently of one another or independently of one another. And now, to discuss what a dependent premise is, dependent premises support the conclusion of an argument only together with, joined with, and dependent upon another dependent premise. Thus, dependent premises cannot support the conclusion of an argument by themselves. And so we never see a dependent premise in favor of a conclusion on its own. We always see them in two or more groups. And so now to independent premises. Independent premises always will support the conclusion of an argument on their own. And so oftentimes we may see more than one independent premise supporting a conclusion, but in a sense we can think of those independent premises as separate and individual arguments for the conclusion. They support the conclusion on their own. So as we say, they have enough power and justification to support the conclusion on their own. Okay? And with dependent premises, what we say is that they always must support a conclusion with some other dependent premise. And in addition, what we say is that if you actually have a situation in which a dependent premise of more than one dependent premises are false, so if one of those dependent premises is false, actually, the support that those dependent premises offer the conclusion actually is, as you would say, maybe destroyed or canceled, something like this, such that there is in fact no more argument for that conclusion. So if one of the dependent premises ends up being false, then you do not have an argument at all from those dependent premises in favor of that conclusion. Okay? We have an example of an argument with dependent premises. We have the example of Socrates is human as the first premise. That's a dependent premise. The second dependent premise is that all humans are mortal, and the conclusion following from those dependent premises is that Socrates is mortal. As you can see, to get the conclusion Socrates is mortal, you would need both the premises that Socrates is human and that all humans are mortal. And actually, the conclusion there follows immediately from both of those premises together. In addition, if you notice that if it ends up being false, that all humans are mortal, for example, if one of those dependent premises is false, and say, for example, we had found some human beings that weren't mortal, then the conclusion that Socrates is mortal would not follow, because quite simply, Socrates could be one of those immortal ones. Okay? And so now a little bit more is to be said on independent premises. While the dependent premises always support a conclusion with another premise, independent premises do the supporting on their own by themselves. You can see this. Many of the arguments with independent premises actually have just one premise. But note that if you also, in a case in which you have two independent premises, we can say actually that if one of those turns out to be false, the argument is not canceled or destroyed. Instead, we still have the other independent premise in support of the conclusion. Okay, so here's an example. We can see the example here with the weather. So the weather forecast predicts rain tomorrow, say. That's our first independent premise. Our second independent premise is that it's rained all week, and then the conclusion that follows from those, of course, is that it's going to rain tomorrow. But notice, though, that if one of those turns out to be false, we still have an argument for the conclusion that it's going to rain tomorrow. So say, for example, that it's false that it's been raining all week. So say, for example, it's false that it's been raining all week, but nevertheless, the weather forecast says it's going to rain tomorrow. Well, in this case, we still have actually a good argument for the conclusion that it's going to rain tomorrow because the weather forecast has predicted it. Okay, so we still are left with an argument even though one of our independent premises is false. Okay, that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed it, and goodbye.